In Chapter 1, we looked a little bit at verbs and predicates. And in this chapter, Chapter 2, we looked at the parts of speech. In this lecture, I'd like to focus on just one specific part of speech, which is verbs. So we go into a little bit more detail about verbs in this lecture. When we think about verbs, we have several things to consider. The first thing that we need to consider is that verbs have tense. What that means is tense refers to time, so verbs refer to time. We have, for example, present, past, and the future. The other thing that we need to consider with verbs is that verbs have voice. In other words, voice refers to whether a verb is an active verb or a passive verb. The third thing to consider is that verbs have numbers or have number. Some verb forms go with singular nouns and pronouns. Some verbs with the plural. I, you, he, she, it are all singular. We, you, they are plural. In English, only the third person singular changes form in the present tense, except for the verb to be. In the verb to be, we have multiple forms depending on the pronoun. The fourth thing to consider is that verbs are either regular or irregular. What does that mean? Regular verbs form the past tense by adding ed to the verb stem. Irregular verbs form the past tense any number of ways that must be learned and memorized. Another point is that verbs have four parts. When you look in the dictionary, you'll see all four parts. You'll see the simple present, you'll see the simple past, you'll see the past participle, and you'll see the present participle. Verbs in the English language have 6 tenses: the present, the past, the future, and the 3 perfect tenses: the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect. I think it's pretty obvious to most of us when to use the present, the past, and the future. So if that's not clear to you, then review your textbook for a discussion of these 3 tenses. Where I think the problems come in is with the perfect tenses. There's often confusion as to when to use the perfect tenses. So let's go through that a little bit more slowly. The present perfect tense is used to indicate an action that starts in the past and continues into the present. It is formed by combining a conjugated form of the verb to have with the past participle. So an example, I have drunk coffee every morning for the past 20 years. Or I have just finished reading a new book by Stephen King. The present perfect tense is have drunk or have finished. In the case of have drunk, we have the conjugated form of the verb to have, so I have, and then we have the past participle of the verb drink, which is drunk. In the case of have finished, have is the conjugated form of the verb to have, I have, and finished is a regular past participle. It's the past participle of the verb to finish. The next perfect tense is the past perfect. The past perfect is used to indicate an event that was completed in the past before another event that was also completed in the past. So we have a sequence of events here. The past perfect is formed by the past tense of the verb to have, which is had, and combined with the past participle of the verb. So, for example, my son had never seen a mountain before we moved to Germany. Or another sentence, by the time I learned German well, I had been in Germany for 7 years. So let's break that down. If we look at the sentence, my son had never seen a mountain before we moved to Germany. We have an event that's in the past. We moved to Germany. The first part of the sentence, though, is written the past perfect, had never seen, because that occurred before the family moved to Germany. So we have a sequence of events, something in the far past, followed by something in the near past, if you can look at it that way. In the second sentence, by the time I learned German well, I had been in Germany for 7 years. I learned German well, past tense, but it took me 7 years to learn German well. So by the time I learned German well, the near past, I had already been in Germany for 7 years, far past. All right, and been is, of course, the past participle of the verb to be. The last of the perfect tenses is the future perfect. The future perfect tense is used to indicate an event in the future that will complete before another event in the future. So similar to the past perfect tense, that where we have an event that completes in the past before another event that completes in the past, we use the future perfect tense to identify an event in the future that will complete before another event in the future. The future perfect tense is formed by the future tense of the verb to have, which is will have, and it's plus the past participle of the verb. So, for example, I have a sentence here: I will have taught at State for 3 years by the end of the semester. The fact is that I started teaching, and this shows you how long I've been teaching this course, because 3 is now 11. So I will have taught at State for 3 years. That is something that is not yet happened. It's going to be in the future. I will reach that milestone in a couple of months. But then at the end of the semester, that's even further into the future. So that's when you would use the future perfect tense. The last point that I want to make about verbs is the discussion of the voice of a verb. We have both the active and the passive voice. In good English writing, the passive voice should only be used sparingly and usually with some purpose. So, active voice, as you know, normal word order in a sentence is subject, verb, object. So, I ate a pizza. I is the subject, ate is the verb, pizza is the object. What happens with the passive voice is that the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. Now, typically in passive voice, if you're using it for a specific purpose, the subject that gets turned into the object in the passive sentence gets lost. And there's maybe a reason for that. Maybe it's not important that the subject be identified, or possibly we want to try to avoid blame, or we want to redirect complaints, or we just don't know who the subject is in some cases with valid passive voice. So the sentence I ate a pizza can be turned into the passive voice by making the pizza the subject of the sentence. Ate has to then go into a different form of the verb. Otherwise, it would be a pizza ate me, which is still an active sentence, but one that doesn't make sense and doesn't say the same thing as I ate a pizza. To form the passive voice, you use the conjugated form of the verb to be and the past participle. So, for example, I ate. Ate is in the past tense. So the verb form to be also has to be in the past tense. And that would be was, plus the past participle of ate is eaten. So we have the passive voice. A pizza was eaten by me. That's passive voice. Pizza is the subject, was eaten is the passive form of the verb to eat in the past tense, and by me becomes is the subject that now becomes the object. Now, would you ever use such a sentence? As I said, that's probably not very good English. But what about the sentence, soccer was played for years in this stadium? That's also passive. I mean, if I had an active sentence that said, the team played soccer, team is the subject, played is the active verb, and soccer is the object. But making it into a passive sentence, soccer was played 4 years in this stadium. And that is a valid use of the passive voice because we may not know which teams played in that stadium. We just want to identify, and it's not important which teams played in this stadium. What we want to identify is the fact that soccer was played here at this stadium. So in that case, a passive voice is probably a good choice.